Parents said, "We're all you have," while my guest room overflowed with gifts from non-relatives. I had them on speaker, standing in the doorway of that little room, toes pressed into the cheap gray carpet. Cardboard boxes were stacked like wonky towers against one wall. Target bags crinkled every time the heating kicked on. And there was a brand new set of teal towels sitting on the futon with a post it stuck to them. "For future sleepovers, love, Jess Purpleheart." My mom's voice crackled through my phone, filling the house anyway. "Do you hear me, Emma? At the end of the day, it's us. We're all you have." I ran my fingernail along the ridge where the skirting board didn't quite meet the wall, trying to decide whether to say what I was thinking or swallow it like I always had. It was a Thursday night, 2 weeks after I'd moved into my first place alone at 32. The first place alone part is important. Up until then, my life had been a chain of compromises and shared leases. Parents' house, college dorm, dingy flat with 3 roommates. Then the apartment I shared with my ex-husband. This crooked little rental house with its squeaky floorboards and buzzing fridge was the first address with just my name on the lease. My friends treated it like I'd won the lottery. In the last fortnight, they'd shown up in shifts with casserole dishes, secondhand furniture, a rug one of them pulled out of her attic. My coworkers pooled money for a grocery delivery. My old lab partner mailed me a silly doormat that says, "Hope you like dog hair," even though I don't own a dog. Meanwhile, my parents showed up once, looked around and said, "It's quaint," in the same tone my mother uses for cheap wine. "I heard you," I said, leaning my shoulder against the door frame. My guest room still smelled faintly of fresh paint and scented candles. "I just don't think that's true." There was a sharp inhale on the other end of the line, that little hiss that always precedes a lecture. "Wow," Mum said, drawn out, like I just slapped her. "Your father and I have been there since day one. We changed your nappies. We fed you. We paid for university. These people, you've known them 5 minutes. 5 minutes." I looked at the stack of board games in the corner. Ones we'd been playing together since I was 19. On top was a card from my friend Nate. "Every time this door opens, I hope it feels more like yours. Proud of you." I rubbed my thumb over the edge of the card and felt that familiar, stupid sting behind my eyes. Dad's voice joined in deeper, more controlled. "Your mother's just saying, when push comes to shove, it's family who will really be there. Blood is thicker than water and all that." I stood there in my too big hoodie and mismatched socks, surrounded by actual physical evidence to the contrary. And for once in my life, my brain didn't fully fold under their version of reality. Instead, this thought popped up, small but clear. That hasn't been true for a long time. If you met my parents at a barbecue, you'd think they were nice. You'd probably describe them as involved or straightforward. They're the kind of people who volunteer to organize the church fete and then complain for weeks about how no one else pulls their weight. Growing up, we weren't the train wreck family. No drugs, no screaming matches in the front yard, no police. We were the good family in our small town. Dad works in finance, Mum part-time at the GP clinic, 2 kids, a dog, yearly beach holidays to the same faded caravan park. What you wouldn't see unless you lived in our house is the way every conversation had to orbit around them. The way my mum's face would go pinched and tight if anyone else talked about their problems for too long. The way my dad could turn any disagreement into a lecture about how ungrateful we were. The way "we're all you have" was less reassurance and more threat, like no one else will ever put up with you, so you'd better cling to us. I have a younger brother, Sam, who slid neatly into the role of golden child without really trying. Where I was too sensitive, he was laid back. Where I argued, he shrugged things off, or seemed to. It didn't help that he looks like both of them. Dad's jaw, Mum's eyes, while I've always been the odd one out, darker hair, different nose, different temperament. One of my earliest memories is of being 6 years old, sitting on the back steps with my knees pulled up to my chest after a fight I honestly can't remember the details of. I just remember crying that hiccupy, snotty sob kids do, and Mum standing over me with her arms crossed. "You know we're all you've got, right?" she said. "Friends come and go. Boyfriends come and go. It's family that stays. So don't you start pushing us away." At 6, pushing them away meant hiding in my room when they fought about money. At 16, it meant not telling them things. Like when my first boyfriend cheated on me with someone in my class. I went to my friend Jess's house, lay on her floor, and cried into her beanbag, and her mom made us hot chocolate and sat with us while I tried not to choke on my own shame. When I got home later, blotchy-eyed and quiet, Mom glanced up from the ironing and said, "You look like death warmed up. Don't bring your teenage drama into this house." Pattern established. In uni, when my roommate's father died suddenly, she went home for a week. When she came back, she couldn't stop talking about how her house was full of cousins and aunties and neighbors bringing food, sitting with them, telling stories about him. It wasn't that the grief was less bad. It was that she wasn't carrying it alone. I remember thinking very clearly, if that happened in my family, Mom would probably complain there weren't enough clean dishes. That sounds uncharitable. I know that. And it's not like my parents never did anything for me. They paid half my tuition and let me live at home rent-free one summer when I couldn't find a job. Dad taught me how to drive. Mom sat up late sewing a last-minute hem on my formal dress because I'd underestimated my own boobs. It's precisely those moments that make everything so confusing, because then when you dare to mention the other stuff, the casual cruelty, the weaponized guilt, you feel like an absolute monster. The thing my parents always gloss over when they say we're all you have is that they've been the ones walking away, bit by bit, every time I became more complicated than the version of me they liked. When I switched my major from accounting, Dad's pick, to biology, my pick, he didn't talk to me for nearly 2 weeks. We lived in the same house, and he communicated through Mom like I was a colleague who'd been put on performance review. "Your father's very disappointed," she'd say, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed while I pretended to type something important on my laptop. "He just wants what's best for you. You'll be on your own if this doesn't work out. You know that?" When I moved to the city after graduation, my parents said they were proud out loud and then complained to anyone who'd listen that I was abandoning them. At every family gathering, someone would corner me and say, "Your mom misses you. She says you never visit." If I pointed out my parents had yet to step foot in my apartment, it was always, "Well, you know they're busy." Then there was the marriage. God, I married my ex, Luke, at 27. He was charming in that loud, take-over-a-room way my parents adore. He sized them up in about 5 minutes and realized that praising my mom's cooking and asking my dad for financial advice would put him leagues ahead of me. It worked. They loved him. Anytime I tried to bring up red flags, how he'd get cold and distant for days, how he'd mock my friends as losers, how he managed to lose 2 jobs in the first year. We'd barely gotten engaged, and Mom was already on wedding Pinterest. "Relationships take work," she'd say briskly. "Don't expect perfection." "I'm not expecting perfection," I'd say. "I'm just worried. Emma, we stayed married through worse than anything you two have dealt with," she'd cut in. "If we'd given up like people do now, where would you be? We're all you have. Don't throw away something good because you've been watching too much Netflix." That line, "we stayed married through worse," used to shut me up because she wasn't wrong. They had stayed married. I'd seen the dents in the plaster near the kitchen door. I'd heard the hissed arguments through thin walls. I knew there were nights Dad slept in the spare room. In my head, I translated "we stayed married through worse" as "if we can survive this kind of misery, so can you," which somehow weirdly became a standard I held myself to. When Luke finally crossed lines even they couldn't ignore, blew our savings on sports betting, and then tried to blame me for nagging him into it, my parents' response was complicated. On the surface, they were outraged. How could he do this to our family? Dad boomed, as if Luke had personally robbed him. Not me. Mom cried and said, "We welcomed him like a son." Underneath, though, there was this whiff of satisfaction. "You never listen," Mom said at one point. "We told you he was lazy. You chose him. Now look, when I left him, moved my stuff out while he was at work, changed the locks, filed for divorce. My friends were the ones hauling boxes down 3 flights of stairs, shoving IKEA bookshelves into borrowed cars, buying me takeaway noodles when I hadn't eaten all day. My parents, They called once or twice to ask logistical questions like, "Will this affect your credit?" And, "Are you keeping the couch?" Mum sent a text, "You chose this. Don't come running to us when it gets hard." When I broke down in front of my coworker Jess one day, shaking so hard I could barely hold my coffee, she said, "You're not doing this alone," in this matter-of-fact way that made something in my chest unclench. Then she and a few others from work started a spreadsheet for Emma Logistics, like I was a group project. Who could help with the actual move? Who could drive me to sign paperwork? Who could bring dinner that first week so I didn't subsist on toast and instant noodles? I didn't ask for any of that. They just stepped in. The house I'm in now is the result of that net catching me. Jess's cousin is my landlord, and she agreed to knock a bit off the rent for the first few months so I could get on my feet. Nate drove around with me until midnight one night looking at Facebook Marketplace listings for a bed frame that wasn't covered in mysterious stains. A woman in my book club I'd only known for a year showed up with an entire set of dishes because she'd been wanting to declutter anyway. And yet, in my parents' narrative, they're the ones holding my life together. Those people will disappear when the novelty wears off, Mum said on the phone now, her voice sharper. Friends, colleagues, they have their own families. They won't be there when you're old and sick. We will. We're all you have. I took a breath that felt too shallow and tried to regulate it like my therapist taught me. 4 in, 6 out, like I was letting air out of a balloon slowly. Mom, I said, do you realize the only reason I'm not living in a motel right now is because my friends helped me? You didn't offer for me to move back in. You told me you don't have the space. We don't, she shot back. Your father's office is in your old room. And anyway, you're not a child. We raised you to stand on your own 2 feet. I looked at the stack of unopened mail on the desk my cousin had driven across town for me, at the second-hand lamp with a little note taped to the switch that said, "For late night reading, love, Meg," and felt my jaw clench. Exactly, I said. I'm standing on my own 2 feet, and part of that is choosing who I let close. Oh, so we're strangers now? She demanded. We did everything for you and now you're going to cut us out because your friends bought you towels? It's not about the towels, I said, pinching the bridge of my nose. It's about who shows up and how. It's about the fact that when I told you I was struggling, you said I was being dramatic. When I told Jess, she showed up with food and a car and a spreadsheet. Dad sighed loudly, that performative sigh he does at the dinner table when he's about to say something wise. Your mother and I might not always say the right thing, he said. But when the chips are down, we're your family. You'll see who's really there in 20 years. Don't burn bridges over feelings. Over feelings. Here's the part that messes me up. A year ago, that line would have landed. I would have backtracked, apologized, told them they were right, promised to visit more, maybe even invited them to help with the house so they could criticize my furniture in person. That's the script we've always followed. The only reason I didn't this time is because I've spent the last 9 months in therapy, and every week, some version of this conversation has ended with my therapist, Layla, saying, "You're allowed to notice who makes you feel small." Look, I said into the phone, staring at the dent in the guest room wall where I'd accidentally smacked a chair leg during the move. I'm not saying you've never helped me. I know you have. I'm just not comfortable with you saying you're all I have when that hasn't really been true. I have other people now. That doesn't mean I don't want you. But I'm not going to pretend they don't matter. Silence. I pictured Mum's face, the tightness around her mouth. So that's it, she said, voice breaking just enough to twist the guilt knife. We poured our lives into you, and now we're just, what? Optional. The worst part is some tiny part of me whispered, yes, and then immediately panicked at its own audacity. Because making my parents optional instead of mandatory feels like blasphemy in my family. Everyone is optional, I said, before I could talk myself out of it. Including me. Relationships go both ways. I'm trying to have one with you where I'm not constantly being told I'm ungrateful or dramatic. Oh, there it is, she snapped. The therapy talk. You think you're better than us now. I think I'm trying to do better, I said. That's not the same thing. Dad muttered something in the background that I couldn't make out. Mum sighed. Fine, she said. Fine. Do what you want. Just remember when those friends are busy with their own kids and you're alone in some flat, we'll be the ones you have left. I looked again at the accumulation of kindness around me. The little bookshelf someone had assembled crookedly, the throw blanket my old housemate knitted in colors she knows I love, the plant by the window from the barista who always writes my name with a smiley face. None of these things were expensive. Most were secondhand. But every single one was physical proof that I am not, in fact, impossible to care about. If that happens, I said slowly, and I want a relationship with you, I'll call. But I'm not going to keep apologizing for having people in my life who treat me well now. Mum scoffed, but I could hear something edge of fracture in it. You're unbelievable, she said, after everything. And that was the moment I realized this conversation wasn't going anywhere new. We'd looped back to the same old script. I express a boundary, she hears rejection, Dad chimes in with a proverb, I end up feeling like I've just kicked a puppy. So I did something I've never done. I said, I'm going to go now. I'll talk to you later. And then actually ended the call without waiting for permission. My hand shook a little as I put the phone down on the shelf. For a second, the silence in the house rang loud, like after someone slams a door. Then a car drove past outside. The fridge hummed, and I remembered that this place is mine now. My name on the lease, my crooked furniture, my choice who sits at this dining table. I walked fully into the guest room, picked up the card from Nate, and read it again. Proud of you. Underneath, he'd scrawled, P.S. We're all you have whether you like it or not, face with tears of joy, which made me snort the first time I read it and ache now. That's the thing, I guess. My parents aren't wrong that friends can drift. People move, lives change, jobs get busy. I'm not naive enough to think every single person who's poured into me these last months will be there in 20 years the way they are now. But the difference, the staggering, life-altering difference, is that these people choose me. Not because they share my DNA or because we're stuck in the same house, but because, for whatever reason, they like who I am when I'm not constantly shrinking. My parents say, we're all you have, like a threat, like they're the last life raft and I'm stupid for reaching for anything else. My friends say, text me if you need anything, and then show up with a drill and a pizza when I say, actually, could someone help me put up shelves? I'm not pretending this is easy. After I hung up, I spent a good 10 minutes sitting on the scratched hardwood floor of my living room, staring at the wall, feeling like I just stepped off a cliff. The guilt is loud and familiar. Tells me I'm an ungrateful daughter. It plays highlight reels of Mum crying on the phone, of Dad shaking his head in disappointment. It whispers, maybe they're right. Maybe you'll end up alone. But there's another feeling under it now, quieter but stubborn. It feels like standing in a doorway, looking at a room full of mismatched gifts and seeing not clutter but evidence. Evidence that I'm not solely defined by the two people who happened to raise me. Evidence that family can look like Jess sitting on my kitchen floor assembling a flat-pack cabinet at midnight. Like Sam texting, I get why you're pulling back. I'm just not there yet, from his own complicated place in this mess. Like my neighbor knocking on the door with leftover lasagna and saying, I made too much. Take some. Even though we've only known each other 3 weeks, I don't know exactly what my relationship with my parents will look like from here. I'm not in a place yet where I can go full no contact, and I don't even know if I want that. There are parts of them I love. There are memories that don't hurt to hold. I'm not trying to rewrite my entire life story to make them villains and everyone else heroes. But I am done pretending their version is the only one that counts. So when they say, we're all you have, I'm trying to remember the guest room, the chaos of it, the warmth, the way my chest tightened up instead of in when I looked at it. I'm trying to remember that I have me, too. The me who finally believes she's allowed to say, that doesn't feel good, and not immediately apologize for it. Maybe one day I'll invite my parents over and they'll stand in that doorway, taking in the chipped furniture and the cluttered shelves and the hand-me-down rug, and instead of saying, it's quaint, Mum will say, it looks like people love you. Maybe that's a fantasy. For now, I'm just a person sitting in a slightly wonky house, trying to build something that feels different from the one I grew up in. And if that means letting my guest room overflow with gifts from non-relatives while my parents huff down the phone about how they're all I have, well, at least this time I can see the difference.